Hello and welcome to English Speaking Made Easy. I am sure you are slowly getting the hang of our new improved version of English Made Easy. We had an episode before and today we are doing a bit of a continuation of what we covered. We thought we will take it in small capsules one at a time. Okay? So, to begin with, we are going to start off with the Grammar Express, your guide to good grammar. In today's episode, we are going to continue with nouns, but another aspect of nouns will be covered today. Okay? So, if we talked about the basics of noun in the last episode, this time we are going to speak about the likely confusions that happen when we use countable and uncountable nouns. Okay? These countable and uncountable nouns are important to know primarily because their usage changes with with verbs and determiners. So, we need to be able to ideally distinguish between these countable and uncountable nouns in English. Okay. With different verbs, with different determiners, their usage keeps changing, and that is why it makes it important to understand the distinction. Okay. Now, let us just start off from the most basic definition of a countable noun. Just like the name suggests, countable nouns are things that we can actually count using numbers. That is, you can put a 1, a 2, 100, a million, and it will still be okay. They can be both singular and plural, which means countable nouns can take a singular form as well as a plural form. Okay? And with the singular form, we often use the determiner a or an. So, when we want to express quantity, the word we generally use before the quantifier we typically use before a countable noun is how many, because like I said before, you can count and give a number. So, we say how, for example, if the word is house, I am sure you know house is a countable noun because it can have a singular house, it can have a plural houses, you can add a house before the singular, and so it fits into all the descriptions that we spoke about in terms of a countable noun. So, when you want to ask etra veedukalundu, how many houses are there? Okay, you can't say how much houses because much does not specify anything that can be counted. So, when you want to speak about something which is countable, we use the quantifier many. How many dogs do you have? How many houses do you have? So, that is how we use the quantifier. Now, like I said before, I am giving you a list of countable nouns, and these countable nouns have a singular and a plural, as you can see. Let us take the first one, dog. This the singular is dog, the plural countable noun is dogs. The same applies for horse. There is one horse, there are two horses. Or you can say a man, a countable noun, you have its plural, men. Idea, you have two ideas. You have shop, you have one shop, you have two shops. So, all these are clear examples of countable nouns, and when you use them in sentences, let us have a look at the sentences there. Okay? And you can see how we use these countable nouns in sentences. The first example, she has 3 dogs. See, dogs is a countable noun, you can give a number before it and it makes sense. She has 3 dogs. Okay, the next one, I own a house. I own a house. House is a countable noun, and before it we can, because it is a single house, like we mentioned in the description, we can use the word a. I own a house. Okay. The next example, I would like 2 books please. I would like 2 books please, another countable noun. How many friends do you have? So, you see how we have used that quantifier many. You see how all these sentences fit into the areas we discussed under countable nouns. Now, let us go on to the other one called uncountable nouns. Now, countable nouns are generally simple, uncountable nouns are confusing. So, what are uncountable nouns? Uncountable nouns are those things that we cannot actually count with numbers. Now, you might wonder, why can we not do that? That is primarily because uncountable nouns refer to abstract ideas or qualities. Now, do you remember we spoke about abstract nouns? In the first episode, we spoke about abstract nouns, abstract qualities. Now, these uncountable nouns normally speak about these abstract qualities. ഇതൊന്നും physical objects അല്ല, നമുക്ക് നമ്പർ ഇട്ടിട്ട് പറയാനോ നമുക്ക് അതൊന്നും, ഇറ്റ്സ് ഓൾ ക്വാളിറ്റീസ് ആണ്. ഒന്നല്ലെങ്കിൽ things are like that, when you cannot, they're all qualities or ideas, or the particular things that are too small, we say they are too amorphous, so you cannot count them. They are, for example, liquids, powders, gases. None of these can be counted in numbers. So, these things are often categorized under uncountable nouns. Now, uncountable nouns are used with singular verbs. They do not have a plural form, and this is what you have to understand. Uncountable nouns do not take a plural form. Now, I can make this clear through a few examples that I would like to give you. Look at these words: tea, sugar, water, air, rice, knowledge, beauty, anger. All these words do not take a number. You can't say, give me 2 waters please. It would not work. You can't say, give me a water please, give me a sugar please. You can't use a or an with that, nor can you use these words in, you can't use them in a plural. So, these words are generally preceded by these quantifiers. ഈ words ഉപയോഗിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾക്ക് നമ്പർ പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. വി കാൻ സേ 1 water 2 water. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ക്വാണ്ടിഫയേഴ്സ് ആണ് a deal of, a great deal of. Now, I am going to give you some examples of uncountable noun. I am giving you quite a long list, and that is important because it gives you a better feel of what uncountable nouns are. So, the first word I have given you is tea. Now, let us look at this. We do not say, give me 2 teas. But the problem is, when you are speaking in Malayalam, that is where the error comes in. In Malayalam, it is perfectly acceptable to say, "Rendu chaya teru." That is how we normally say it. But when if you try to translate that into English and you say, give me 2 teas, that is wrong, because tea cannot be quantified. It is an uncountable noun. So, you say, and even when you are speaking about you have to use some other words before it. Either it could be a weight or a measure. I would like 2 glasses of tea, 2 cups of tea, or I would like 2 kilos of tea. You need to quantify it with another word. You can't just use the word tea alone. The same applies for these words. Sugar, you can say a pinch of sugar, a spoon of sugar, 2 spoons of sugar, but you can't say 2 sugars, 1 sugar. You can't use that. You have to give a quantifier. The words, so the same thing applies for most of the other words: tea, sugar, water, air. The other word is knowledge, beauty, anger, fear, money, love, research, safety, evidence. Now, when I come here, I would like to point out, I have seen this error popping up quite often, especially regarding these 2 words, evidence and research. Most people do not realize that in the right usage, you cannot use this word as evidences. You cannot use a word like researches. That is not how these words are used. These words cannot be put in a plural, because they are what we call mass nouns. They are what we call uncountable nouns. So, you can't say evidences. You can say a piece of evidence. Okay, I have had, and even if you are using it in the plural, we do not put an s there. I have some evidence regarding this. That some shows the quantity, but we can't say I have some evidences. That does not work. I have some evidence. I have collected some research. Research was done. These words all are countable noun. They do not take a plural, though if you've seen and you see it very wrongly used in many contexts. So, be careful the next time you see it. Okay. Now, how do we then quantify it? What are the words we use to quantify these uncountable nouns? Here are the list of words we generally use. One is a lot of, some, much, a bit of, a great deal of. And if you want to make it a very exact, now the puns I gave you before are not exact measurements. Now you want to give an exact measurement, you can use words like a cup of, a bag of, a kilo of, a handful of, a pinch of, an hour of, a day of. So you can quantify it like that. Okay. So that is how we express quantity in uncountable nouns. So remember, when you are using uncountable nouns, we cannot say how many. When we ask a question, it always is how much. If countable nouns had how many, uncountable nouns have how much. So shall we now go on to some examples so that it becomes clearer for you? And pay careful attention to the word research. Okay? The first sentence, there has been a lot of research into the causes of this disease. It is multiple, but they haven't used a plural, they have only used the word research. The next sentence is, he gave me a great deal of advice before my interview. Though by nature it means Kore advice tanu, but we are not using advices. Instead, we are saying he gave me a great deal of advice. Remember, advice is also a word which is often wrongly used in terms with a plural, advices. You don't say advice. He gave me a piece of advice. He gave me a great deal of advice before my interview. The next sentence, can you give me some information about uncountable nouns? So you need to actually learn these words which are used as mass nouns, and this is a very big error you make, and it's a glaring error when you write it down. When you speak, perhaps it gets level, but when you write, it may be a problem. Look at the next sentence. He did not have much sugar left. We didn't use many, we used much. He did not have much sugar left. You want to give it more to quantify, you want to give a recipe, you would say mix 1 cup of water, mix about 300 grams of flour. So this is how we use uncountable nouns. So I suppose that area is now a little clear to you. Before I end up with this particular section, I want to tell you some tricky spots that you have with the use of countable and uncountable nouns. The thing is, some nouns are countable in other languages, but they are uncountable in English. And so, certain rules need to be followed regarding these words. The common words that normally you go wrong are, have a quick look at those words. One is accommodation. I would suggest you write them down too, in case in case you can go wrong, in case you forget. And this is something you cannot, you have to just learn it. You cannot expect to do it any other way. These are the words which do not take a plural. One word, advice, accommodation, baggage, there is no word baggages, behavior, furniture, information, luggage, news, traffic, weather, travel, work, trouble. None of these words take the plural form with an S. So, please do not use them in a plural form. That would be very wrong, and it would affect the flow of your writing. So, now we have them in sentences. Let me explain them in some sentences to you. I would like to give you some advice. How much bread should I bring? I didn't make much progress. This looks like a lot of trouble to me. We did an hour of work yesterday. I did a lot of work yesterday. Words like housework, homework, it does not take a plural. So, and then another word which goes wrong quite often is the use of the word hair. You can't say hairs. It's always uncountable. So, when you say, oh, she has so many hairs on her head, it's actually very wrong. You cannot use hairs. It's not a plural for hair. It's always hair. except in one context when you say she seems to have a lot of grey hairs, but otherwise it's always hair. You don't use a plural hairs, like we say, oh, she has long blonde hair. The child's hair was curly. I washed my hair yesterday. All these contexts, it is just hair, do not use a plural. So, I suppose you understood all those problem areas regarding the use of countable and uncountable noun, and I am sure there are many errors that you would have been guilty of. It's something that we learn something new every day. And pay attention to what we have said right now, so that you would not go wrong in the use of countable and uncountable nouns. Okay. Now, with this we go on to our next section, and that is what we call lexica. Lexica is your guide to good vocabulary. This episode of Lexica, we have certain words that you could use to describe a person's personality. Now, that is a very important thing, isn't it? We meet so many people, and we always look for words we can use to describe them. Now, of course, the words I have chosen for you are like phrases. They are not typical words like brave, happy and all. They are like they are expressions we use to speak about people and what kind of temperament they have. So, these are extremely useful words. You can definitely use these words for someone you know or someone you would like to describe. The first word, when you say someone has a bubbly personality, the word is bubbly. It means a person who's happy, who's very optimistic. It's an extremely positive word. Someone who's active, energetic, optimistic. You say she has a very bubbly personality. And I think that word itself gives you, the expression bubbly itself gives you the idea as to what kind of person what kind of personality that person has. So, the first word is bubbly personality, a nice word to use. You can use it among your friends and it's a lovely word. The next word is someone enters the room and that person is very positive. Just that person's presence makes you feel very happy. You feel delighted to be around that person. So, you can use this word, ray of sunshine. Okay. So, someone who is a ray of sunshine is a person who has a very positive influence on others, whose presence makes others feel calm and happy. So, we call that person a ray of sunshine. So, you get that expression, a ray of sunshine. Oh my God, my friend Sita, she is a ray of sunshine. When she enters a room itself, she brings in so much of positive energy. So, it is a very positive word when we want to speak about people. Another word that we have is the word charismatic. Now, charismatic means someone who has great charm, someone who inspires others. Okay, so we have many leaders who are charismatic. Charismatic basically means charisma. It's derivative from the word charisma, which means having someone who inspires, someone who has the charm. So, you can say he is a very charismatic speaker. Many of our leaders, many of our film stars, they all have that quality. They are very, very charismatic. Okay. The next word, if you have a friend who is always talking, loves to talk, is very talkative. So, you say, oh, she is so chatty. The word you use is chatty, okay, for someone who is quite talkative and all that. And then the other word that we use is the word classy. When someone is stylish, elegant, someone who has very high standards in terms of behavior and who's very well turned out, we say, oh, she's so classy. So, I am just going back to the words we discussed, so that before I go on to the others, we spoke about the word classy. We spoke about people who we call a ray of sunshine. We also spoke about someone that we would refer to as being very chatty, who talks quite a lot. Okay. We spoke about people who are charismatic. We spoke about people who have a bubbly personality, and I am sure you can use a lot of these words. What you need to do is look around. What kind of friends do you have? What kind of people do you meet? Do they fit into these classes? Okay. Now we will go on to a few more words that we can use to describe people. This word is called down to earth. It's kind of like a common word because it means someone who is humble, someone who is practical, someone who is realistic, someone who is grounded. We say, oh, he's very down to earth. You do meet a lot of people like that, people who are grounded, who are realistic, who know exactly how things are going. So we say he's very down to earth, he's very humble, he's very practical kind of a person. Okay. Now another very nice word you can use is easygoing. Now, easygoing, who do you refer to a person as easygoing? I am sure we all love friends who are easygoing. There are some of us who are very tied up, small things, and then you kind of your mood goes off. It's difficult to tackle some people, but some people are easygoing. No matter what happens, they are very relaxed. They are always fun. They are always easy to deal with. So, we call them easygoing. Okay? So, some people are easygoing. So, you see the different ways that we can describe people, and these ways and these expressions that we use are extremely important as part of our daily dialogue. Of course, there are many other words too which we will definitely deal with in the following episodes. Okay? Because too many words perhaps it may not register with you. I am sure these words have settled down well and you can definitely use them when you want to speak about people. Okay. So, with this we come to an end of our section Lexica. Now, we are moving on to the next section, that is Say It Right, your guide to good pronunciation. So, now we are going on to Say It Right, your guide to good pronunciation, and here we are going to deal with silent letters. Now, silent letters are quite a problem in individual words because when you don't know whether these words have to be pronounced or not, most of the time the silent letters are because they have been borrowed from other languages. So, it is something you can learn only by being careful and listening to good English, and also by there are certain basic rules, but there are exceptions to these rules also. I am going to give you certain basic rules which apply when we have silent letters. Okay. Now, the first one, a common silent letter which is used as a word is the letter B. Okay. If you look at it, the letter B is not pronounced after M when it comes at the end of a word. And there are many words in English which are like that. See, when I give you the words, it will be clear. Look at those words. You have words C-O-M-B, L-I-M-B, D-U-M-B, T-H-U-M-B. All these words have an M and they have a B and it comes towards the end. In all these words, we don't say comb, we don't say climb, we don't say thumb. But this is what we hear a lot of people say, but it is wrong. When you pronounce these words, the B is silent. It is comb, climb, thumb. The B is silent. So, you need to remember in words where M is B is preceded by M and it comes towards the end of the word, the B is not pronounced, as you see in these common words. Okay. Similarly, B is also not pronounced before T when it usually comes at the end of a word. Like for example, look at these words D, E, B, T. D-E-B-T, നമ്മൾ കടത്തലാവുക. It's not debt, it is debt. The B is silent. Okay, we don't say debt, we say it is debt. The same applies for the word doubt. B is not pronounced. Doubtful, B is not pronounced. And this word S-U-B-T-L-E, which means വളരെ light ആയിട്ടുള്ള differences, subtle, it is not subtle, it is subtle, subtlety, subtleness. So, we do not pronounce the B in any of these words. Okay? B is silent, but if you look at the pronunciation, but if you look at the spelling, all these words have a B, but it is not pronounced. Okay, so I hope you will pay attention to this particular rule. Now we have come to the final section of this episode, that is let's talk. Here we actually have conversation for you that you can use. In the previous episode, we started off with the basic greetings. We gave you hints on how to introduce the other person. Now, this episode, we are going to deal with something called small talk. Now, small talk in Malayalam would be Kochu Vartamanam, that is just speaking about certain random things before you actually go on to the topic itself. Now, why is small talk important? Small talk is very important, especially in countries like the United States, Canada and England, not just in informal conversations, but even in official formal conversations. In fact, it is said to be very, very important. Like when two business colleagues meet, they wouldn't go on to their business or talk regarding their business in the first place itself. They would first ask, make some small talk, and only then would they go into the actual business. So, this is very, very important that you know. And how do people generally make small talk? Now, one way in which people start off a conversation, and it's so common these days, is when they see you, they would start off, how are you? In fact, how are you is so common that it's often attached to the other greeting, which is hi, how are you? That's how we normally say. Along with that, there are other ways in which you can speak. The how are you is one way in which you can ask someone. When it's on the kind of first things you would say when you see someone. Other ways, or a neutral way, is how are you doing? How is it going? How is it going is informal. How are things? What's on? These are a little more informal. How are you? How is it going? How are things? What's up? These are all words that we use when we meet someone and we want to start off a small talk with them. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this question is when someone asks you how are you, what is not expected is that you give a detailed account of how you are feeling. How are you is just a pleasantry. Okay. You just need your response to how are you is normally, yeah, I am fine. Okay, I am fine, thank you. And you respond back and ask the other person how he is. So, you do not, it does not warrant a very long answer. You just need to say, I am well, how are you? I am fine, how are you? These are the kind of ways in which that you respond. So, when someone asks you, how are you? You need to ask them in return, I am doing well, thank you. So, how are you doing? Yes, thanks. And yourself? Okay. So, these are how you would respond back to the other person. Now, the problem here is there is one interesting expression, you must have heard it very commonly. People say I am good, but there are actually two points of view regarding whether that is actually ideal, because good does not refer to how you feel, it is a quality. So, many people feel it is grammatically incorrect. So, never use it in a formal context. If someone asks you in a formal context, how are you? Ideally, do not say this word I am good. Though it is very, very commonly used now, it is not grammatically correct. You have got so many other alternatives, you can always dabble with them than saying I am good. Okay. So, I hope that you have got those basic steps. So, see how we are progressing, we are taking it one step at a time. From greetings, we have now gone on to what we call the beginning of how you make small talk. Okay. So, with this we come to an end of today's episode, and I hope you found the episode useful, and I hope there are takeaways that you can use when you speak and when you write. So, thank you from us, and we will see you again with another interesting episode. Thank you.